Yeah. All right. Well, thank you very much for taking the time to join me today, Wo.
You're welcome,
Mm,
Savannah.
thank you. Yeah, if you wouldn't mind just going ahead and introducing yourself briefly, and I'll do the same, and then we can jump right in.
Awesome. Hi, I'm Wo. I am a theater teaching artist, actor, musician, um, and I work with SVE as part of Partnership with Children, and we are teaching theater at two different elementary schools right now. I am co-teaching artist with Camille Thomas, and it's an awesome time.
That's great. Yeah, thank you. I'm Savannah Fitzpatrick. I've been with Partnership with Children for many years now. We're talking today about a dissertation that was published in 2022. It was called The Value of Promoting Social and Emotional Learning in Elementary School Students. And it was published by Valerie Marie Hatcher at Lynn University. Um, So as the title suggests, it's, very much connected to the work that the Student Voice and Engagement program you work in, attends to. I guess I wanted to start by asking you, was there anything in this paper that really jumped out at you or gave you a gut reaction of some kind, whether positive or negative? And what was it slash why?
Um, it was really validating just to read, how supported by the research what we are doing is, and how everyone's kind of coming around to this idea of social emotional learning being important, and also how it can be taught through the arts. And that was something that I definitely felt very strongly about as a student. Um, because I went to school in the early 2000s, which was kind of the boom of the No Child Left Behind era, and like standardized testing really taking off across the country. And thankfully, I do really well on standardized tests, and like I am able to learn in that way. But I remember feeling like, well, why are we focusing so much on this? And, feeling a lot more um, excited by exploring theater and exploring music and exploring artistic things. And it's something that I wish I had more of, especially when I was in elementary school, which the paper focuses on. Because we had visual art, we had a little music, but we didn't have theater or dance. And I think it's important for young kids to be able to experience all the different art forms that they can from an early age. Um,
Absolutely. I'm wondering, how did you find theater? If your school, when you were a kid, wasn't really offering that to you, and it was more like visual arts oriented, like how did you and theater come to be buddies?
it was middle school. So in middle school, we got to choose our elective, and they had a band, an orchestra, and choir. And then you could do an half semester art, half semester theater. And I was like, I want to do theater. I'm dramatic. So I I chose theater. And then yeah, from then on it was just like that was my place. And I just did shows at my school after school. And yeah, just kept doing theater in high school,
It's
studied theater in college.
Yeah.
Um, so yeah.
Yeah. From your perspective, what's the most important thing that theater has taught you?
Theater has taught me how to express myself and be myself and find a community through doing that. Um, I was very expressive as a kid, but I was also could be very shy at the same time. And so yeah, theater just like broke me out of my shell and allowed me to explore all these different identities and parts of myself, because I have many, many layers, as we all
Multifaceted.
do.
We're all onions, as Shrek
Yes.
said. So,
Yes.
um, one of the studies that the researcher references in the dissertation found that high-risk students who are involved in the arts typically go to attend college. Given that student voice and engagement focuses on students in elementary school, what do you see as the benefits to beginning that exposure to arts integration at an early age?
Mm. Well, the two schools that we're working at are they're both out in Brownsville, around that area. Um, and so students are like aware of kind of the socioeconomic like status of their neighborhood. I feel just in our different activities and like reflections of how they're writing about their communities and stuff like that, and the people that they're seeing out there. But overall, the spirit in both the schools is very positive during our program time. And I think that we're coming in and showing them, that learning can be fun, and that their voices matter, that they can come up with ideas and present them and express themselves, and embrace their culture. This current unit is focused on student written work. So right now we're doing I Was Raised by Poems, which is basically a kind of poem that allows them to talk about the different cultures that they come from, or different foods that they eat, the neighborhood that they come from, people who are raising them. Um, and it's a very beautiful tapestry of all these different identities that's coming out. So it's great to have them expressing that.
Yeah, that is beautiful, and I think, teaching that at a young age as opposed to a kid learning that it's okay to be themselves as a teenager, I think, like, that gives that much more time to, like, process and practice that and, like, internalize it as something that's just known, you know, individually as opposed to, like, something that you have to learn later in life. So I think introducing those concepts, and in such a fun and creative way in elementary school, it's like only setting kids up for success. Um,
I agree. Yeah. I think it's great to have a constructive way to talk about people's culture and heritage. Um, and as opposed to just like, oh, we don't talk about race or we don't talk about like nationality or whatever. And that's kind of how I felt elementary school. Like it was just like, okay, we're learning about Martin Luther King and like, but you know, what about like mixed people? And I don't know, it was just um we didn't talk about those things. It just wasn't like the spirit of the times, I guess, to like have
yeah,
kids talking about those things. But I think it's so empowering for them. And we also have a few students in both schools who are Spanish speaking students who are from other countries and they've just immigrated to the United States in the last year. And so I feel like some of them kind of are at risk in a way, because they feel that they're behind with reading, or even some of them didn't get to learn how to read Spanish before coming over here. So now they're learning a new language and also learning how to read. And
so
so,
hard.
yeah, it's really hard.
Yeah.
But some activities that we've done um, have gotten them to want to try to learn, which I think is like the most important thing. If the desire is there
Yeah,
for a
it'll
kid to
come.
like want to grow, then they will grow.
That makes a lot of sense for
Yeah,
sure.
we were actually doing it was like a silent movie monologue kind of thing where one person's speaking, the other person's like pantomiming. And so for every class, like we bring in a Spanish version as well. And I usually work with those students. And so for my Spanish group, there was um, there was a girl who doesn't read, and I didn't know that at first because it was like week two. Um, but she was like, "I'm gonna try," and so she was basically like pretending to read it. Like she had tried to like memorize what I was saying, and then like was trying to say what I was saying before, and looking at the papers that she was reading, and I was like, "Wait, you're saying something different now. Um, are you?" But I was like, "But you're trying," and I appreciate it. Like she actually tried to read something, which I think she normally wouldn't have done. So that was cool.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
think that says a lot about the comfortability of the classroom that you've built, in terms of, like, I don't know, students feeling at home enough where they can be vulnerable. Because like that, putting yourself out there in that way when you know you're not gonna be able to do the thing that's being asked of you
Mm.
in the, like, most proper way, at least, is intimidating, that's scary. So, yeah, I'm sure, sh clearly you're doing something right. She feels happy and like it's fun to be in your class, that she can be vulnerable and it's okay. Um So, like a lot of this dissertation also focused on teacher preparedness for arts integration and things of that nature. And the researcher discusses in the paper using art to demonstrate academic concepts helps engage students more deeply in the material and promotes social and emotional growth, as we've discussed. But many school teachers are specialized in what they teach, and they lack instruction on how to effectively do the arts integration aspect. um,
Mm.
what advice would you give to a teacher who feels that way? And if they could focus on one thing to build their confidence, what would you recommend that be?
Mm. Um, well, my experience, like first off, in the schools that we've gone to, is that there is definitely already like a social emotional learning base that's already happening there before we come in. So it's not like this foreign concept, which is good. Um, and then with the arts component, um, some teachers are a little more familiar with theater as a form as opposed to others. Um, but I would say they're all pretty open to supporting us. So sometimes, depending on what they have to do in the day, they're more available to, act with students in scenes or direct students in scenes or help facilitate, which is always fun. But yeah, I think the best way for them to learn is just to work with teaching artists and work with or just absorb like culture and arts on their own as well and go to like educational theater or you know um or even just theater in general and start understanding how that can be applied to the classroom.
Yeah.
Um also I think just embracing the idea that not every activity has to be about meeting standards, but maybe this activity is to allow students to create something or to interact with something we're already doing. So
Right.
we took a book that they read, which is Flora and Ulysses. Um, and so they had already read this for their English class, and then we kind of adapted that into these pantomime scenes that they could do. And they loved taking this book that they already knew and putting it on its feet and turning it into a theatrical form. So I think it's just a matter of taking the materials that they already are learning and rethinking, maybe I don't need another test grade right now. Maybe like I want them to work on working in groups or work on building characters or, actually physicalizing some of these things that we're learning about.
Right. Yeah. So maybe like for teachers, it's about kind of reframing the approach a little bit, maybe not dramatically, but slightly to emphasize process over product a little bit more for students, and perhaps like that can, because I think some teachers feel intimidated, like, oh, like I know science, I teach science, I'm not an arts professional. How am I going to use theater in my science classroom? And I think that
Right.
maybe it's something more about like you and the students all kind of like learning together at the same time rather than, producing
Yeah.
something like you're saying. So,
Yeah. I
yeah,
remember one of my middle school science classes, we had a day where like we all just did sketches. Like we had like groups and we did sketches about all these different concepts we were learning. And it's like fun. I think most of the time, I think that would be like for the review part of the unit, like before the test or whatever,
yeah,
just reviewing things in a fun way. Or we had like trivia games, or I don't know. It's just when kids are excited or having fun, things just soak in better. And when you actually have to use the information in a focused way through some kind of activity, then it sticks more than just like writing definitions in a textbook, which I'm not saying people are doing anymore. I hope they're not doing that anymore. Um, but yeah, when a student actually has to play a character from a book, they actually have to learn who the character is and what they're like and what they want. Um, and so being able to create based on, a book that you're reading actually requires all of the learning to
right.
happen before that.
Totally. Yeah. Um, Do you have any favorite moments of collaboration between yourself and either one of the social workers who works in SVE or a classroom teacher who's in SVE? Because I think that like that's one of the really cool things about the SVE program is, of course, the students are benefiting as they move from year to year to year through the program, and they get to keep building on what they're learning each year. But I also think that there's the professional development aspect of the program that helps the teachers such that once the grant is over and the program ends, hopefully they can continue some of these practices that they've observed or even employed during this process themselves,
Mm,
beyond the SVE program. And so I feel like a lot of the benefits of that kind of come out of the collaboration, between teacher and teaching artist or teacher and social worker or any of the triangulating relationships here. So yeah, I guess I'm wondering if there are any like favorite moments of collaboration that you might have.
mm. Well, our kind of end of semester presentation at PS 284, we got to go down to the auditorium. This was like an all hands on deck, like double class session day. And so we had like little costume pieces for each student, and they got to present their Flora and Ulysses pantomime scenes on the main stage. And it just went really well because everyone was working together. And, we don't get a lot of time to plan with each other. We kind of, send our lesson plans and, hope that all of it gets absorbed and everything. But everyone was just working together really beautifully to make sure all the students got their costumes. And so each group would come up and we would close the curtain and then they would like get into their places. Um, but eventually what ended up happening is the teachers ended up going back there and like while the curtain was closed they were like helping set up the students and saying you go here, you're standing here, you're upset, like you're doing this pose, and then they would be like, okay, we're ready, and then the curtain would open. And it's just it's really fun to see the teachers kind of letting go of like, oh, I need to be serious, and really all of a sudden getting into something they didn't even think they were going to get into, you
Yeah.
know so that's kind of the magic of theater is, people at first are like, I don't want to do that, and then it starts happening and they're like, okay, I'm doing it, yeah, it's
Yeah.
fun.
You're in too deep. The excitement is it
Yeah,
just takes over.
yeah,
So
yeah.
yeah. Well, this is my last question for you. Are there any success stories from SVE that you would like to share? And, I guess success can mean many, many different things. So take that however you interpret it.
Mm.
And yeah,
I mean, that was a success story.
that was, yeah.
uh I'm trying to think of another thing. I think just the amount of progress that we've made in the past like 3 or 4 months has been really awesome. From starting out, and well, Camille and I's collaboration too has been like a work in progress. Because when we first started, um, we like struggled to figure out who was doing what at what time.
Yeah.
Um, because for me, it doesn't really work when like two people are trying to lead an activity at a time. And so we kind of figured that out and figured out like, okay, we're going to write down like you're leading this activity, I'm leading this, you're leading this, and we'll like very clearly pass like the baton to each other. Um, and so I think building that relationship has been a success. And I think um, building like our opening routines and like our closing routines has been like a really, or rituals, I guess, opening rituals and closing rituals has been like a really successful thing that students are just very like attuned to at this point. Like we come in and we do like our physical warm up and we have addiction warm up with like a tongue twister. And we have finger breathing, and then we have like our community agreements, and um, then we end with affirmations. Um, and so, yeah, I feel like the biggest success right now is just building the structure for everything to happen inside of. Um,
Yeah.
and we've also figured out like what space we want to be in for the class because like we tried to start in the auditorium, but it was too big and like students were running around. So then we went back to the classroom, and then we had to figure out like, are we going to keep the desks there? We're going to move the desks and all that stuff. So I think just figuring out how to make this relatively short theater class, because it's like one period, relatively short theater class where we pop in and pop out in the middle of the school day, work in this classroom environment.
Yeah, no, I think you raise a lot of great points, and it kind of makes me think of just like the broader process of applying for and then actually sustaining these types of grant programs, whether it's through the US Department of Education, like Student Voice and Engagement is, or through something else. There really is a lot of like logistics and planning and things that need to go into it. And you can spend like a whole year writing it out on paper and trying to plan these things in advance, but doing it in practice is very different, and it's going to look different in every school with every different kind of teacher that you're working with, et cetera, et cetera. So, having that time to really work out, a system that's gonna be sustainable for that particular circumstance or that particular environment, is really important, and I think, that just speaks to what it's taking behind the scenes to, like, kind of push SVE forward, and then also on the scene itself, to have it keep going and keep evolving, such that we can continue to serve the students. So, um, anyway, yeah, thank you so much for your time, Will. I really appreciate it.
Welcome.
This
Awesome.
was lovely, lovely conversation. Um, so yeah, I hope you have a great rest of your day.
Thank you, Savannah.
Thank
Great
you. Take
interview.
care.
Thank you. Take care.
Bye.
Bye bye.